Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 18th of December 2013 and it's 1:02. Apologies for the bit of a delay, Mr. Garish getting himself ready.
Couldn't find my glasses. I'm afraid it's another show without glasses, which always makes it very interesting for us.
After yesterday's amazing show, it's going to be tough to beat that one today.
Well, we've had really good feedback, a lot of people interested, and we've already had several people saying that they've watched it several times. So that was Carl Lentz talking about common law, basically. But it does seem that the interview touched a nerve with a lot of people, and we know there's more and more research going into common law and what's really going on in our court. So we'll touch on a bit of that in today's programme. We just comment briefly on the weather. The weather's been, I think, appalling down here in Plymouth overnight. We've had very heavy rain. It's blowing quite hard from the southwest, I believe, and it's still on the chilly side, so not too good. Actually, we don't like it that way, but we'll put up with it for today.
We will.
Okay, well, what have we got? We're just going to come back onto this theme that Britain is not slowly falling apart because people have changed. It's our fault. We are going to be saying more and more strongly over the coming weeks and months that the country is falling apart because it is being torn apart by our government. And of course, it's a cross-party operation. This was the front page from a previous edition of the UK column. And we'd highlighted some of the things going on, the British military being handed over to the French, squaddies dying to protect the opium crops, British students betrayed to debt slavery, public spending decimated to pay for the bankers, EU budget increased as people die in the NHS. So it's pretty heavy stuff, but all of this is the change agenda. This is a cross-party plan to basically undermine what's going on in Britain. We've lost that off the main slide, Mike. There we are. And if you're not aware of it, you need to do your research on the big society. Don't believe us, but big society is bringing the government to the lowest possible level. And there is no difference between the politicians. So here we've got a combination face of Cameron and Clegg. Very little difference. You cannot trust either of them. And of course, they've come out of the same mould as puppets of the bankers. So what can we expect? Well, certainly we can expect this.
Yes.
8 out of 10 people saying that David Cameron must raise the minimum wage to stop children going hungry. But this is almost like pleading. We're going to have a petition, dear David, King Cameron. You're going to have to help us feed the children. Whereas, in fact, what David Cameron's doing is supporting the bankers.
Totally. And I mean, maybe they shouldn't give themselves an 11% pay rise to help put in towards the minimum wage some of that money that they're going to be given to the MPs. Maybe.
Well, if they're printing money, quantitative easing, producing more and more and more money out of nothing simply to prop up the corrupt international banks is a question of priorities. And of course, we could solve this nonsense overnight by reinstalling the Bradbury pound and simply printing our national currency as credit. But of course, we're seeing it in jobs, Mike. I think you're busy at work back there. How's it going?
Sorry. Yes. Okay. Before we get on to jobs, well, this is jobs related. This is David Cameron talking about how from January the 1st, 2014, EU job seekers will have to wait 3 months, a whole 3 months, to claim out of work benefits. That's wonderful for them. Of course, anybody from Britain going to live in France has to wait 3 years before they can claim any out-of-work benefits, and they can still only claim out-of-work benefits if they have actually contributed something to the social services system. You know, that's seems like a significant disparity between the rules on the continent and the rules over here.
Mike, is it just me, but I find it obscene, I think the word is, or the expression is, that David Cameron tweets out what is essentially going to become law or part of our government process is now tweeted as if this is some, you know, we're arranging a party for the weekend, so we're going to tweet out what we're doing.
That amid his selfies with Obama, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Anyway, moving on to yet another tweet. Here we've got Cameron saying, "Great news! There is a record 30 million people out of in work." So he can't even get his grammar correct. There is a record 30 million people in work, creating more jobs, key to our long-term economic plan for a better future for Britain. Well, of course, there's a comparison of UK unemployment with the US and the EU, and the EU is definitely suffering a lot worse than we are. So we're sitting at around 7.4%, I think it is. And of course, the Bank of England has said that once that hits 7%, then they're going to start raising interest rates, quite probably. So anybody with a mortgage has got that to look forward to in the not too distant future. But if we just look at UK employment now, this is not unemployment, this is employment by sector. What was noticeable in the Office for National Statistics is the sort of priorities that we have on the types of jobs. And I'm sorry the text is quite small on the descriptions of these bars here, but we can see that they list professional, scientific and technical, and then real estate, admin and support, health and social services, wholesale and retail, and education. No mention of manufacturing. So manufacturing is included in other because it's not significant enough. So for the nation which began the Industrial Revolution, really we should probably be pretty ashamed of ourselves for the fact that we permit our government to maintain manufacturing as an also ran, as an other. And the situation isn't going to improve because as pointed out, well, I pointed this out a couple of weeks ago and was echoed on the BBC by Jim Ratcliffe, who's the head of INEOS, who own and run the Grangemouth power station. He pointing out that King David may have decided to invest in Britain's power infrastructure, but he's doing so by offering bribes to the foreign companies building that infrastructure. So the French-Chinese consortium, which is going to build the new Hinkley nuclear installation, for example, and that installation is going to provide 7% of the total generating capacity of the UK. They're going to get a pretty insane minimum of £95 per megawatt hour, which is more than double what the wholesale price is at the moment, and it's more than double of what Jim Ratcliffe actually managed to strike an agreement with EDF for taking energy from France, because INEOS have interests in France as well. So the French are able to generate nuclear power in France at less than half the £95 per megawatt hour. So, well, what does that say about this country? Just remember that 95 quid is going to be a wholesale price, so don't expect any expansion of high value manufacturing jobs anytime soon. The agenda from King David is coffee serving and shelf stacking, which is evidenced by the other glaring statistic released by the Office for National Statistics today and not mentioned by any of the mainstream propaganda media. And that is that 14% more people at this point of the year than began the year are having to work in second jobs just to make a living. So that's a massive, I think it's a fairly massive increase of people working second jobs, because one job isn't enough anymore. And that's why King David is so proud of the economic success that Britain has become.
Yeah, the story's unfolding in front of our eyes. The job is to get people now to really do the right things to stop this lot in its track, and we've got to focus on the people. Who's causing the problem? This is a personal issue. It's not some vague government department that's causing the trouble. It's individuals.
Can I just ask, how many of those jobs, they say it's a record unemployment now, people back in work, how many of those, I wonder, on the 0 hours contracts, Mike, do you know? They would be included with that record amount of people back in work.
They don't give that level of detail, and of course they're not breaking down. The other group there isn't being broken down into each other industry sector in the main statistics bulletin. So you can't actually find out from the main statistics bulletin. You have to go searching for much in much more arcane areas of the ONS website to find out what is the actual proportion of people working in manufacturing at the moment. They've kind of hidden that level of detail away and down into the deeper recesses of some of the spreadsheets that they produce. They're not provided in the high level overviews.
Couldn't imagine that's deliberate, Mike. A little bit of nudging.
No, not at all.
But of course, if you're going to run a dictatorship, you're going to collapse a country, you're going to use subversion, you need to have a propaganda machine, which will bring us very nicely onto the BBC. And here he is, great chum of the Tory party and King Cameron. So we've got Lord, isn't he? I think Patten blocking the release of a report about the BBC's IT disaster. Well, is it small? 100 million. We can't feed children, but Patten can waste £100 million worth of public money. Document is expected to be highly critical of the management of the project, but the key thing here is that once again we've got Patten heading up the BBC trustees, blocking information coming out. Why are we so interested in this man? Well, of course, he's a common purpose guru, and text is quite small on this one, but this has come straight off the Common Purpose website, so of course you can have a look at it yourself, but it's giving his background, and educated at Balliol College, Oxford. That's where they all come from, of course. Governor of Hong Kong, chairman of the director of the Conservative Research Department. He's back in Oxford at the moment, and board member of Bridgepoint, Russell Reynolds. Oh, and EDF as well there, Mike, actually, which is a bit of a coincidence. So he's working for the British by day and working for the French by night. But this is the key bit we're very interested in, is that by the end of 2009, the BBC had spent over 158,000 on common purpose training. The BBC has refused to disclose the names and positions of those staff. And we're going to ask, are they linked to Savills paedophile ring, which of course is also being suppressed by the BBC. So if you want to know where the fraud, the corruption, the dirt is, of course it's in the BBC, because that is the means by which that organisation can be controlled to do the government and the bankers' dirty bidding. We hope that you will help us by digging in and researching yourself. And we're going to keep saying to viewers and listeners, don't believe us, get in there and research yourself, because when you see it in black and white for yourself, you'll believe it.
Yeah.
Well, north of the border, the nonsense goes on. We're very interested in this subject, of course, because if these criminals can break up the United Kingdom, we are much weaker for trying to deal with the onslaught by the EU supranational beast. And here is Alex Salmond, and he's got a little plan to bribe migrants to come into Scotland. So we've got problem with employment in Scotland. We've seen many people leave Scotland to move elsewhere for jobs. We've got huge problems in all the major industries as well. And now what have we got? Well, we got Alex Salmond wanting to get more migrants in, and he's going to bribe them. Well, of course, one of the reasons he wants to do this is because he will be buying votes for his thing. So we're just going to say, can the canny Scots not really see this man for what he is? We would say a fraud. But if you want any sort of proof of what sort of man we're dealing with, well, here we are. So £54,000 of public money seems to have gently disappeared during a visit by a whole lot of the Scottish government people to do with golfing. 54,000 seems to have his name attached to it, but they can't seem to find it. So would we trust this man? We wouldn't, and I'm sure that the average Scottish man or woman should be able to suss this guy out as well.
Yeah, I think so.
You can watch it unfold. So the solution, of course, is what?
The solution
is to give
terrorists, rapists and paedophiles the vote. A report that's due out today by the MPs and Lords on whether or not to give prisoners serving 12 months or less the vote is due out today. It's recommending giving inmates postal votes for their home constituency, but the report is saying that Britain is under international law obligation to comply with the European Court of Human Rights, and defying it would have grave implications. It doesn't say what the grave implications are, but apparently it's going to cause grave implications if we don't go go ahead and give these prisoners the vote.
Well, we'd be fined by the EU.
Probably,
what would actually happen.
Apparently, UK is one of 5 of the 47 Council of Europe members to ban all convicted prisoners from voting. So we should know the result of that later on this afternoon, whether prisoners can get it. I mean, I would hope to think that paedophiles, rapists and terrorists got a little bit more than 12 months serving, but who knows in this current climate?
Not under the present regime. And of course, the domestic terrorists in Westminster are still out on the street, so they get a vote either way, unfortunately. Well, let's follow it up with this, because the Express reporting on Lord Hanningfield. He's been in prison, I think, for something else that he's done. But he's now been just clocking in for sort of 21 minutes so he can pick up his £300 daily attendance allowance. And we'd just like to say, well, you know, it's oversight, it's fiddling. But we've got people being sent to prison effectively for stealing loaves of bread. What society we're living in Britain. And this is the other bit that goes with it. So we've got the police manipulating the crime figures. The false watchdog says there is an incentive to make performance look good. Well, of course, the government started these ridiculous targets that put the pressure on the police. But now we've got the targets. Of course, we're seeing police officers carrying out a variety of actions. And I'm going to say the text is very small here. But a former chief inspector in West Midlands Police told the hearing about the techniques used by officers to improve performance figures, and this is known as cuffing, nodding, skewing and stitching. So we thought we'd have Met Police Commissioner Bernard Benedict Howe, if I've got, Brogan Howe, sorry, the name I've spelt incorrectly, I apologise for that. The man who is reducing crime by refusing to investigate paedophile activity around the former MP Cyril Smith. I bet I've spelled his name wrong again in the next one as well, but there we are. We're getting towards the end of the year.
So maybe these prisoners actually could, you know, if they're going to be given the vote, maybe they could also just be given jobs within the government. Possibly.
I think there's quite a lot of merit in this, actually, because I'm coming to the conclusion that there's a lot of people in prison who, one, shouldn't be there, and that if they were out with a proper job and suitable income, they'd do a lot better than the MPs in Parliament. So I think I'd agree with you on that one. But let's think about this. So another article from The Guardian, ex-prep school head teacher convicted of child sex offences. This is going back to 1959. So they've had a successful prosecution on this man. I believe this is Clegg's old head teacher. I could be wrong on that, but I've got a feeling. So the police can investigate crimes going back to 1959, but when it comes to Elm House in London, where the children were being abused, and we have members of Parliament as were going there, the police can't investigate that. Do you think this is due to the fact that there's a big cover-up going on with our politicians who've been involved in paedophilia?
I think so.
Or is that a bit cynical?
No, I think that's fine. And I do think we should actually get Bill Maloney on soon to see how, because he's doing a lot of work.
That's true.
Around that. So I do think we do a visit from Bill soon.
Well, I better add to that of course, Bill reports to us that there are many, many good men and policemen and women in the country who are outraged at the fact that senior officers are covering up paedophile crimes by senior members of the establishment. So we're going to say, as always, well done those police officers, and please keep doing what is right, what is moral, what's correct, because we're going to need you to sort out the police force as things get worse. But, well, if they can't pick up the terrorists on the ground, we can spy on them from the sky, I think is the...
Indeed, RAF 13 Squadron have set up a drone control centre, RAF Waddington in Lincolnshire. The Defence Secretary, Philip Hammond, visited there yesterday to be shown the new control centre where the RAF pilots sit and steer the Reapers and press the buttons to release rockets that impact the ground in Afghanistan 4,500 miles away. Inside the little cabins where the drones are operated from, clocks are set to 4.5 hours faster in line with the time in Helmand province. Apparently there's a 40-second delay between the pilots pushing the button to the impact in Helmand. And I went looking this morning for figures from UK drone set off and the figures of civilians injured or killed, and I couldn't find anything. I found a lot in America, but I couldn't find any official figures that can match up with how many people have been affected, innocent people have been affected by these drone strikes.
Well, I think in one of the reports, you know, they did mention some civilian casualties, but the inference is this is very small. But I'm going to say, as an ex-military person, there is something very distasteful about this. You leave your house in Lincolnshire, you go to work, you kill people thousands of miles away, you can't be sure that the person you've killed is actually a combatant, and then you go home in the evening. Presumably they're going to be giving these guys medals for sitting in a tin box.
I think they're giving them counselling, because, I mean, what effect must that do to these guys? They've done a lot of training, then they're just going in and literally playing a computer game and then having to go home. So I wonder what kind of psychological damage it's doing on these pilots who've gone through a lot of training to know that, you know, they're just driving up the road from home, going there, pushing that button, killing God knows how many people, and then packing up, going home, having their tea.
Well, they'll probably be referred to help the heroes and the mental assistance that they're giving. But I thought if we just put that one back up, Mike, because I think we've got an extra piece on this. We thought we should give Philip Hammond a mention here. So here he is stroking one of the smaller drones, and you know, we've said he's disappointed that his attack on Syria didn't work, so he's fondling a new toy designed for killing more men, women or children. He doesn't care. This man doesn't care. But we know what's in the background. We've got the fact in this country we can't feed our children, but we've still got the money being magicked out of the political pot to pay for this lot. So I'm not allowed to say psychopath for this man, but low empathy, I think I am allowed to say. Well, we're particularly interested in the courts, and of course the issue of the Italian lady who had a baby taken away by caesarean section against her wishes has stayed in the press, largely due to the influence of head of the Family Law Division, Sir James Mumby. And this was the Mail's article, "Top Judge Hits Out at Campaign to Gag the Mother Whose Child Was Forcibly Delivered Through Caesarean and Put Up for Adoption." Now, the thing about this is that we have seen many, many cases where the local authorities automatically go for injunctions to shut people up from putting the truth out. UK Column is well aware of this because we've had 4 of them. So they are terrified of exposure. But the real problem is this. This is not the key issue. The key issue is that the family courts are in fact administrative courts, and that is their places of business. So we're going to say, does Judge Mumby actually understand this? He's a very experienced judge, but children are being taken away not under a court of common law, where of course people can put up a proper defence. Children are being taken away in what is a place of business. No jury, no media, no public of any description. And of course, we can now already prove that local councils are simply hiring courts as places of business in order to extract money out of people who haven't paid their council tax. So we're going to say live to Judge Mumby, please can we start to have some explanation as to how we have got courts being run with a sole judge, effectively a secret court, and those courts are taking away people's children. We'll come on to the lies, perjury and all the rest of it later. But the publicity that it's happened is not the answer. The answer is to get these issues raised in front of a proper jury. Well, yesterday we come back to the amazing response that we had over this gentleman, Carl Lentz. He is an American. He was talking about what he has discovered about common law and what he's been doing in the States. So if you want to see the detail of that, look at the UK Column programme from yesterday.
I have had lots of messages come through on how people can contact Carl, and I do believe if you go to his website, broadmind.org, there is a contact thing where you will be able to get in contact with him. And it was also Uncommon Law, was it Uncommon Law? Which was Barley's website.
All of those details are actually on the thing.
All of those details from yesterday's show. But this is broadmind.org where you can get in touch with Carl.
Well, this is what we wanted to mention today, of course, that Roger Hayes, chairman of the British Constitution Group, and Guy Taylor, over the last year really, have been doing fantastic work exposing what is really going on in the British courts, and this subject of common law keeps coming up because what we are seeing is a government and a judiciary desperate to strip away the benefits of common law to us. So if you are supporting the British Constitution Group, and we hope you are, you might think that it's gone quiet for a long time and that means nothing is happening, but I can assure you that in the background there's been a lot of good work, and that's going to come to the fore, starting with a bang, basically in the new year. Well, a little bit more, came through to us this morning because a gentleman pointed out that he's been suffering under the Department of Work and Pensions, and of course their people, Atos. Is it possible to bring this one up, Mike? Thank you. There we go. So here they are. But there's a little scam going on, and it works like this apparently. Atos say they don't decide if you get benefits, and the DWP say that the Atos report decides if you get benefits, and therefore they're trapping people in this little circular argument. But what the person told us today, and there's going to be more work on this, is that it would appear that the removal of benefits itself is breaching an inalienable right, which means that there is effectively fraud going on in the system. So at the bottom in blue, we've actually put a link through to the government's website itself, but we'll keep you posted on this. But we're seeing problems, aren't we, Louise, with people across the country who are suffering as benefits are being stripped away.
Yeah, and especially those within the NHS who work as well. Managers and admin staff, actually, we're going to be moving on to. Is that the right one? No, it's your story with the Charles.
We're getting there. We're getting there. I've got to bring this up. Here he is, Prince Charles. Christians are being deliberately persecuted by militant Islamists in the Middle East. Well, of course, there's some absolute horror stories going on at the moment, including in Syria. Remember, of course, that it was the British government initially backing Assad. Now we are beginning to see really some of the vicious attacks on Christian communities coming out in that country. We know that tens of thousands of innocent Syrian men, women and children are also dying and being harmed. But here he is, Prince Charles, who's consistently worked to undermine the Christian base in Britain, fathered, of course, by Duke of Edinburgh, if I've got that right, who wishes to be incarnated as a virus to reduce the world population.
Amazing, isn't it?
It's just... It would be amusing. We're laughing,
of course. It's not amusing at all.
But are we surprised at the state of the country when we got these sort of people involved? It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Where are we going then?
NHS managers. Okay. I've got a blank screen in front of me. It'll come good.
All right, 1 in 6 NHS managers and admin staff that were made redundant were taken back on by the NHS after receiving large redundancy packages, according to figures from the Department of Health. Some received up to £605,000 redundancy, only to land another 6-figure salary within the year back with the NHS. 2,534 got new posts within a year. 403 of those were rehired within the same month. Also, figures show that 3,211 managers made redundant have been rehired. Apparently, new tougher rules are being brought out that will ensure this never happens again. But that isn't the point, really. Yes, Mike?
It sounds very like the BBC.
Very like, exactly, yes. I couldn't agree more.
So the other part of it is this one, of course, isn't it?
Then we move on to this. Hospitals are turning to private agencies to hire nurses at the cost of £155 per hour. Thousands of NHS nurses were axed by the coalition. As we just mentioned, managers were rehired, but it seems that nurses were not. Instead, NHS have been employing temps, which so far has cost the NHS £175 million this year alone. Currently, the NHS newly qualified nurses get about £11 per hour within their first year. But not in Wye Valley NHS Trust. The rate for agency nurses there is £154.72 an hour, 14 times more than what an official NHS nurse is being paid.
Yeah.
All I can say is, hello, what is going on? I mean, it's just a bit like the whole Lynn Home, the whole thing is just, it stinks.
It's collapsing organisations deliberately from the inside, and of course we
then
know.
You're bringing in private firms. So the agency, I believe the nurses get 80%, say for instance of this £154 an hour, the nurses will get 80% of it, and then the balance will go to the recruitment, the 20% will go to the recruitment agency.
Yeah, well, Derriford Hospital in Plymouth a few years ago had a nursing crisis, mainly due to the poor management in the hospital. What did they do? They recruited nurses from the Philippines. Came in. Many of them couldn't speak English, but they did a good job, and they were hard working, and they had many compliments from other staff. But what happened when they were fully trained? They all went out into the private sector where they could earn more money. Yeah. So we undermine the jobs of the people working for the NHS as a public sector service. You undermine them, you collapse the management in the hospital, and then bit by bit you hand it away to the private sector. And who is the private sector? Well, these are global companies who are making vast amounts of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Chums of Cameron.
Yeah, well, it doesn't really get much better within teaching. Hundreds of underperforming teachers have been given payoffs to get them out of their jobs. Apparently 5 councils have admitted making severance payments, but it's likely those teachers will go straight back into another classroom. In the north of England alone, it's been reported that 330 teachers were given approximately £10,000 each in payoffs. Lancashire topped the payoff with 2.4 million being paid out, followed by closely behind by Northumberland at 395,000, Sunderland 330, Durham and Gateshead about 200,000. But interesting, there's a tiny section in this article where it says unions actually believe the payoffs are being given to older teachers to make it an easier way for young teachers to come through. So, yes, Mike?
Well, what's actually happening is that the older teachers with the experience are being taken out of the system, and replaced with younger teachers who have been trained in a particular way.
Exactly.
But aside from that, they still aren't doing anything about the number of unqualified teachers that are operating in the education system in Britain. It's an absolutely amazing number.
Yes, it is.
And Clegg's attitude to this is that so long as someone is working towards a teaching qualification at some point in the future, then they're perfectly. It's perfectly reasonable to have them in the job.
Well, can I just say, actually, there's an app you can get, one of these applications called Groupon, and you go on there, and it offers online teaching courses for to be classroom assistants for £39. So you do an online course, which is just like, it's a voucher site, where you can get cheap deals and what's going on. And there's one trained to be an online teaching assistant. Trained online to be a teacher for £39, and then they come out with a qualification to be a teaching assistant. And that's on a voucher site.
Be interested to see who's actually running courses like that.
We'll have a look.
I'll come back to this point. Research it yourself. If you find one of these stories that is of interest to you, get digging into it, because if you find information that we haven't got, we'd be delighted to hear from you. And if you discover it yourself, you're going to believe it and spread the word. So get researching.
Yep.
I couldn't resist this one. I'm just going to let you comment on it.
Well, I'm just going to comment. Apparently boys are going to get lessons on chatting up girls due to fears porns warping their views of women. Apparently male teachers are going to give them tips about how to ask a girl out and how to treat a woman. And apparently women are going to, the girl students are also going to have the same. And apparently it's about improving self-esteem and helping them to grow up to be decent men. Just going to lessons will make no difference unless you look at the whole person rather than just a student. And this is according to the head of Chase High School in Westcliff-on-Sea in Essex. Apparently the scheme is also going to include golf lessons, football tournaments, camping, survival skills to encourage team building. Your thoughts, Brian?
Well, I think Mike's keen to...
Yeah, I find that pretty disturbing, actually. And lessons on how to chat up girls, that immediately brings to mind the myriad of dodgy NLP sites presenting the notion that you can use NLP in order to chat up girls in the pub.
I mean, it isn't as dodgy as teaching kids to masturbate at the age of 5, admittedly.
Well, all this is an attack on young people, but of course the thing with this is you don't deal with the problem. The problem is what's coming through the internet. So we'll pick out Google because Google could stop this problem overnight. They are tied in with Mr. Cameron in a family way, I believe. And of course, at the moment, Google doesn't want to do that. Google is the multi-billion-pound company that said it did not know how much money it made out of porn. Its accounting was so appalling when they were asked that question, they couldn't actually answer it. So we don't get rid of the source of the problem. What we then do is bring in effectively counselling. I think this is what it is. And if anybody's squirming at the mention of NLP out there because you're trained in NLP and you're a therapist, we're going to say we're getting more and more contact from NLP trained people who are themselves now beginning to get very, very worried at what they regard as viral NLP. So this is politicized, a politicized agenda which is spreading through a viral NLP system.
The thing is, a lot of these NLP practitioners are still under the guise that, well, I believe that they're doing good thing learning the NLP and it can be used for good, and they can't see the nastier side of it and the darker side, which people really do need to wake up.
I think next year we ought to be able to get some people talking to us. We could do some interviews about this, but of course one of the immense dangers with going on an NLP course is usually it's experiential treatment training, which means that you're going to get a dose of NLP yourself during that training process. Well, we'll come on to that. Now we're going to move on to what's happening in fracking. We are aware that fracking is a controversial subject at the moment from a number of areas, but UK Column is well aware at the moment that basically there's not only the risks to the countryside and water supplies and the environment, we also know that the big companies behind it are being fully supported by the government, a government we believe would want to turn peaceful demonstrations into trouble at every opportunity. So a little bit of reporting, and then I think we're going to get Ian Crane live.
I think so. I just wanted to highlight this story before we bring in Ian. A map published yesterday shows 2/3 of the UK land will be available for fracking firms to licence. A report from the government states a major fracking effort would deliver 25% of the UK's annual gas needs and provide 32,000 jobs. 1 billion of incentives can be injected into communities that are going to accept fracking. And MPs say the major energy companies have expressed an interest in new fracking licences, and they expect up to 150 applications, which would cover 15% of the UK. So the best person really, I think, to talk us through this is the one and only Mr. Crane. Hi, Ian.
Hey, Lou, Brian, how you guys doing?
We're doing okay. So, what's going on? Barton Moss, and your thoughts on this story, this new map, 2/3 of the UK will be available?
Yeah, of course, it's no surprise to me because that's what I've been presenting throughout the UK over the past nearly 12 months.
Yeah.
In fact, the first presentation was in early February of this year, where I was trying to make people aware that this was the plan, that 64% of England and the central belt of Scotland would very soon become licensed for fracking, and people needed to start actually thinking about the implications of this. And then yesterday, of course, we have this 174-page document, which I printed out last night. It's quite a tome. I haven't obviously read it all the way through yet, but it says exactly what you've just said, Lou, and that basically, everywhere in the country now that is perceived as being over potentially recoverable shale gas or coal bed methane deposits is up for grabs. And I did an interview last night with LBC and I was speaking for about 10 minutes before Michael Fallon came on. And in my opening remarks, I actually made the observation that this document is quite possibly the best recruiting tool for the anti-fracking community, because what this does is it now states categorically that 64% of England is effectively potentially going to be licensed early next year. And, you know, those people who thought that this was just up in the Blackpool area or down at Balcombe or at Barton Moss now need to understand that, you know, the implications of this are going to impact upon them directly. And if they're not motivated by the observation, and this is what I stated last night, that everywhere that this has been unleashed, it has resulted in the contamination of water, soil and air. It has resulted in the absolute tanking of property prices, then, you know, God help us. I have a very nasty feeling. In fact, my worst nightmare is actually sort of some few years down the road, looking back at the videos of my Fractured Future presentation, looking at you know, the fracking nightmare programs, looking at the camps at Balcombe and Barton Moss and wherever else it is that they spring up, and just looking out at a wasteland and just having to make the observation that by God we tried, but the British people, unfortunately, just didn't realise or didn't want to engage a government that literally is determined to destroy this nation as we know it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've got some slides here of what's happening up at Barton Moss. Ian.
Well, Barton Moss, you know, obviously on Monday, a turbine blade was delivered, an early Christmas present for iGas, and we talked about that on the Fracking Nightmare show on Monday evening. But this morning, a orange coach turned up at around about 6:30 or so, and was parked in front of the iGas gates. 5 people attached themselves by varying means to the coach. One was locked onto the steering wheel and the accelerator, 2 inside the coach, 1 on the roof, and 1 brave soul actually underneath. Now, in the last hour or so, all of those people that were locked on have been released and taken, obviously, away by the police, but they've been released from their lock-on the coach, and the coach has been towed away from the entrance, and the rig, the main rig, has now arrived at the Barton Moss iGas site. So, obviously on Monday night, I was asking the question as to whether they had experienced a major operational failure. It would seem that whether they did or they didn't, they've gone ahead and they've bought the main rigging, which means that the exploratory well is obviously going to be starting to be drilled any day now. So for the next couple of months or so, there is going to be probably 24/7 drilling going on at the Barton Moss site. Now, what this serves to do, obviously, with this coach and the lock-on, it made it into the media this morning. It was certainly on the Guardian web pages by 9 o'clock. I haven't really seen it on the BBC, but you know what it's doing is at least getting the awareness out there that there are people who are very, very concerned. And, you know, as I said last night in LBC show, all we want is for people to look at this for themselves. When Michael Fallon came onto the show, I mean, it is like listening to a soulless robot, because he trots out all the palliatives about how Britain is different, how we have robust regulation and controls. We don't. And the reason that these people will not participate in a live debate or a head-to-head debate, they will only speak when they know basically that there's either a sympathetic audience, or they have what they call a moderated program where nobody else can speak, so that I can be cut off if I want to interject. And they know that if people take a look at this, they will realise that it is a potential nightmare. It is an abomination. And you know, when he talks about, you will never ever hear Michael Fallon or anybody from the industry or Lord John Brown, or Andrew Austin from iGas, Francis Egan from Quadrilla, you will never ever hear these people say, we want you to take a look at this for yourself. We want you to take a look at how successful this has been in Colorado, in New Mexico, Pennsylvania, Australia, because they are absolutely relying on people not taking a look.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Ian, just 30 seconds of comment, but you've put a tremendous amount of effort into this. I think you've travelled about 11,000 miles around Britain. You've met many groups. You've talked to lots of different people who've been concerned about fracking. And I'm going to say to our audience, your effort into this has brought the agenda of fracking onto our screens, as it were. But of course, if the same effort was put by other people into what was happening in the NHS or what's happening in schools, what's happening with the police, we would be starting to get the lid off this. So I'm going to say live today, we think that your effort in bringing this one to the fore has been absolutely brilliant. But we are going to encourage other people to put the same amount of effort into covering other topics, which are also, of course, extremely important to our future welfare and that of our children. What would you...
Brian, let me just say that first of all, it's not just me. There's a lot of people, who are putting a lot of time and effort into this. I mean, this is the beauty of the anti-fracking community, because there's no national organisation. It's not like Australia, where they have one organisation, an umbrella organisation called Lock the Gate, which, in my opinion, has been totally infiltrated and is all but ineffectual. In this country, we are a loose network of individuals and small groups, and there are a phenomenal number of people all bringing whatever talents they have to try to ensure that we raise awareness on this, but at the same time we're challenging planning applications. We're going through the detail of submissions to the Environment Agency. No one person can do this, and it needs this commitment from a significant chunk of the community. And I absolutely endorse what you're saying. We need it on all the other areas. And Brian, in conjunction with UK Column, we have the AV5 event next year in May, and the subline for that conference is humanity versus insanity, because this is what we're up against, and what we have to try to achieve is get people to recognize that humanity has to step up to the plate here. Otherwise, it is just going to descend into abject corporate slavery. We have a very narrow window of opportunity. That window may be just, I think, potentially a few years as opposed to a few months. But nonetheless, we have to use every opportunity that we've got to get small groups to address each of these issues, and obviously bring about the change that we all know we need to see.
Yeah, okay, well, Ian, totally agree with that. And of course, yes, we also recognise the many people around you. So thank you very much for giving us that report.
Thanks, Ian.
And stay with it.
Okay, guys, catch you later.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, as we end the programme, we're really going to do it on a note which undermines the insanity that's come into this country. So we've got to give you the sad news that Mrs. Coles, wife of John Coles, has died. Now, we covered this story some time ago, but essentially this couple that had been married 55 years were separated principally by Devon County Council, but John Coles was continually blocked from being able to go into a nursing home to see his wife. This case was, in our opinion, and in thousands, tens of thousands of people who actually saw our report, was unbelievably cruel. John was in a desperate state to be able to see his wife, but Devon County Council continually sought redress in the courts to block him from seeing his wife, and they even put an exclusion zone around the nursing home to stop him getting anywhere near it. It was unbelievably cruel. So we are very sad to report that Mrs. Coles has passed away. John saw her alive for 10 minutes, but he was arrested when he returned the next day. And so her funeral is on the 23rd of December at St. Peter's Chapel.
That's Monday. I thought you said it was Friday. Monday's the 23rd.
Monday's the 23rd. Yeah. Okay, Monday the 23rd of December. I'm having a bad day.
You are having a bad day, okay. But it's okay.
St. Peter's Chapel, Exeter. And we're going to say, please do support if you can, because this is the state that Britain's got into now, that you can have a vulnerable husband and wife team separated by the word of the state. Well, the state not at government level, but in the first instance at county council level. So we've just put up some of the people that have actually been involved in this terrible incident. It's got to be led by Devon County Council because they were heading up the social care provision, sanctuary housing, and at the end of the day, UK Column as usual was threatened with legal action by Rag & Co. So what situation? We've got women being forcibly restrained, well, drugged and sectioned to steal their children.
Yeah, and cut open.
And now we've got elderly and very vulnerable husband and wife teams being separated. This is Britain in 2013. Unless we all do something about it in the way Ian is suggesting, we need people to be mobilised in different areas right the way across the country. It's going to be worse in 2014. Yeah. No violence, peaceful, polite, but you can still be very firm and determined in getting the perpetrators out of their positions of power. Where is the problem? It's quite clear to us. It's across all three parties, and we are talking about our own politicians. Until they're replaced with better people, we're going to see the situation in Britain get worse. So
that's it. Well, just a quick reminder, we've got T-shirts and bumper stickers available from the website, and tonight is the UK Columns Christmas party. Should be all in quite a nice state tomorrow's show.
Well, we're going to say we are trying to end the year with having some fun and something uplifting, and of course we
with some surprise guests coming along as well.
Indeed. So for the rest of you, don't go researching late into the night every night, because most of it's very dark stuff. Make sure that you do the right things as well.
Have a couple of mulled wines.
Enjoy your family. Get out walking, and a glass of mulled wine can't be too bad. Thanks for all your support, and I think we're saying last
show's tomorrow, is it?
Friday. Okay, got that wrong as well. That's been the Summer Today's programme. Sorry about that. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.